I watched her raise the crystal flute, her crimson nails gleaming under the chandelier light. 10 years together captured in that single gesture, the way her wrist turned slightly, how her eyes narrowed when she smiled. Details I'd memorized like the lines of my own palm. "To my husband," Clara announced, her voice carrying across our dining room. Our families shifted forward in anticipation, silverware stilling, conversations pausing. Anniversary toasts were meant to be sweet, sentimental things, not executions. "You think I'd let a loser like you raise my child?" The words hung in the air, alien and sharp. "He's not yours. He never was." The room went silent except for a few gasps. My brother-in-law's fork clattered against his plate. Someone, my sister, I think, whispered, "Oh my God." I didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at Clara, memorizing this new version of her face, this stranger wearing my wife's features. She looked disappointed, as if my lack of reaction had stolen her moment. Her mother leaned forward, wine glass swaying dangerously in her bejeweled fingers. "We always knew you weren't the real father," she added with practiced cruelty. "She just needed someone stable until she could do better." The table erupted in nervous titters from her side of the family. My side sat frozen, eyes downcast or fixed on me with horrified pity. Clara's smile faltered slightly as I continued staring, saying nothing. She'd expected tears, perhaps, shouting, a scene that would confirm what she'd been telling people, that I was unstable, emotional, insufficient. Instead, I simply picked up my water glass, took a measured sip, and placed it down with a soft clink. "Would anyone like more salmon?" I asked. 3 months earlier, I'd found the test buried at the bottom of our bathroom trash can. A paternity test, partially wrapped in toilet paper. Careless. The kind of mistake someone makes when they're too confident to consider getting caught. I remember staring at it for a long time, my fingers numb, heart suspended between beats. 5 years I'd loved that boy. 5 years of nighttime stories and fever dreams, of teaching him to ride a bike and bandaging his scraped knees, of being dad. The clock showed 3:17 a.m. Clara wouldn't be home for hours. Another work emergency with Daniel Whitmore, her boss. I'd believed that lie for months. I ordered my own test kit that night. When it arrived, I swabbed the inside of Josh's cheek while he slept. Told him I was checking for strep the next morning when he groggily asked. 2 weeks later, the email came with the results. Not a match. I didn't break down. Didn't scream or throw things or call Clara to confront her. In that moment of confirmation, something crystallized inside me, a cold, hard clarity I'd never experienced before. If she'd simply had an affair, perhaps we could have worked through it. People make mistakes. But this? Letting me raise another man's child for 5 years while she sneered behind my back? This required a different approach. I hired Martin Seaver the next day. Former military intelligence, now a private investigator who specialized in corporate espionage and high-stakes divorces. His office was sparse, functional, like the man himself. "I need everything," I told him, sliding an envelope across his desk containing half his fee. "Every meeting, every text, every dollar spent. I need to know how deep this goes." Martin nodded once. No judgment in his eyes, just calculation. "This kind of investigation takes time, and it won't be cheap." "I have both," I replied, though only one was true. The time I had. The money I'd need to find elsewhere. That night, I got up after Clara fell asleep and went through our personal files. Passwords, account numbers, tax returns. I photographed everything. Then I started on her laptop. Clara had always been careless with security, using the same password for everything, leaving accounts logged in. It took less than an hour to download her email archive and cloud storage. Her text messages synced to her laptop automatically. By sunrise, I had 5 years of digital history copied onto an external drive. Thousands of messages, photos, and files. The raw material of her betrayal. And mine was just beginning. The dinner guests cleared out quickly after Clara's announcement. My family left with tight hugs and whispered offers of support. Her family departed with smug smiles and backward glances, as if watching the final moments of a man drowning. Only after the door closed on the last guest did Clara's veneer crack. "Aren't you going to say anything?" she demanded, yanking off her earrings. "Scream? Cry? Something?" I collected plates from the table, stacking them carefully. "What would be the point?" "The point?" She laughed, high and brittle. "The point is that you've been raising Daniel's son for 5 years. The point is that I'm leaving you for him. The point is that you're pathetic." I nodded, continuing to clear the table. "You've made your opinions very clear. Thank you for your honesty." She slammed her palm on the dining table. "React, damn you! This is why I've always—" She caught herself, but not before I saw it. The flash of contempt that had always been there just beneath the surface. "Always what, Clara?" I placed the stack of dishes in the sink. "Always thought I was weak? Always laughed at me with your lover? Always planned this moment?" Her eyes narrowed. "How long have you known?" "Long enough." I untied my apron and hung it on its hook. "I'll sleep in the guest room tonight. I imagine you'll want to start moving your things tomorrow." As I walked past her, she grabbed my arm. "That's it? No fighting for your marriage? For Josh?" I looked down at her hand until she released me. "He's not my son, Clara. You just told everyone that. And you're not my wife. Not anymore." The flicker of uncertainty in her eyes was the first genuine thing I'd seen from her in months. She'd wanted a reaction, needed one even. My calm acceptance had thrown her completely off script. "Daniel's leaving Miranda next week," she said, her voice suddenly smaller. "He's taking the CFO position at the London office. We'll have a fresh start." I smiled then, and something in my expression made her take a step back. "I hope that works out for you both." Martin's reports came in weekly, each more damning than the last. At first, it was just the affair. Hotel reservations, dinners, weekend trips disguised as conferences. The usual sordid details of infidelity. But by week 3, something else emerged. Patterns in the financial records didn't add up. "Look at these expense reports," Martin said, spreading documents across my kitchen table while Clara was at yoga. "Dinners for 6 when security footage shows only 2 people. Hotel suites booked on corporate accounts but used for personal stays. First-class upgrades, spa services, jewelry, all billed to Whitmore Corp subsidiaries." I ran my finger down a column of figures. "They're embezzling." Martin nodded. "And not very carefully. They're either extremely arrogant or extremely stupid." "Both," I said. "Daniel thinks he's untouchable because his father-in-law is the founder. And Clara—" I shook my head. "Clara's always believed rules don't apply to her." "Well, corporate fraud applies to everyone." Martin gathered the papers back into his folder. "The question is, what do you want to do with this information?" I stared out the window, watching a neighbor walk his dog across our manicured suburban lawn. Such a perfect facade we all maintained. "I want them to lose everything," I said quietly. "Not just money, status, reputation, security. I want them to feel what I felt when I realized my life was built on lies." Martin studied me for a moment. "That's going to require patience, timing, and it won't be clean." "I'm not looking for clean," I replied. "I'm looking for complete." The morning after our anniversary dinner, I woke before dawn. Clara had spent the night in our bedroom, door locked. I made coffee and eggs, ate methodically, and dressed in my best suit, charcoal gray, subtle pinstripe. The one Clara had always said made me look almost handsome. By 7:30, I was in the parking lot of Whitmore Corporation, where both Clara and Daniel worked. She in marketing, he as the CFO. It was early enough that the executive floor would be mostly empty. Security knew me from company events. I smiled, signed in, and was waved through with barely a second glance. The elevator carried me to the 32nd floor, where a receptionist looked up, surprised. "Mr. Bennett? Clara isn't in yet." "I'm not here for Clara," I said pleasantly. "I need to speak with Audrey Winters in HR. It's urgent." 20 minutes later, I sat across from Audrey and James Liu, Whitmore's legal counsel. Between us lay the folder containing 3 months of Martin's work, financial records, hotel receipts, doctored expense reports, and security footage of Clara and Daniel together when they were supposedly at separate corporate events. "This is—" Audrey trailed off, her face ashen as she flipped through bank statements. "Extensive," James finished for her, his expression grim. "Mr. Bennett, you understand the seriousness of these allegations?" "I do." I straightened my tie. "I also understand that Clara announced at our anniversary dinner last night that my son, the child I've raised for 5 years, is actually Daniel's biological child. She seemed quite proud of the deception." Audrey's hand flew to her mouth. James closed his eyes briefly. "I'm sorry," Audrey said softly. I acknowledged her sympathy with a nod. "I'm not here for personal reasons, though. I'm here because I believe Whitmore Corporation's shareholders would be very interested in how their CFO has been embezzling funds to finance his affair with my wife." James leaned forward. "You could have gone to the press or the SEC with this." "I could have," I agreed. "But I respect this company, and I believe in giving people a chance to handle their problems internally first." It was the right approach. By appealing to their corporate pride and their fear of public scandal, I gave them ownership of the problem. They would be thorough. They would be merciless. "We'll need to conduct an immediate internal audit," James said, already reaching for his phone. "Of course." I stood, buttoning my jacket. "I've provided copies of everything. The originals are securely stored with my attorney." A lie. I didn't have an attorney yet. But the implied threat was clear. If they tried to bury this, I had other options. "Mr. Bennett," Audrey called as I reached the door. "What do you want from this?" I turned back, considering the question. "Justice, Ms. Winters. Nothing more, nothing less." While Whitmore Corporation digested the bomb I'd dropped, I moved on to Phase 2. The nice thing about wealthy, powerful men like Daniel is that they often marry women equally formidable. Miranda Whitmore was old money, Ivy League education, and descended from one of Manhattan's founding families. She wasn't someone who would scream and throw plates when confronted with her husband's infidelity. She was someone who would execute him with precision. I mailed the package myself, hand-delivered to her Upper East Side address. Inside was a curated selection of evidence, intimate photos, text exchanges where Daniel and Clara mocked their spouses, hotel receipts, and finally, the paternity test confirming Daniel as Josh's biological father. I included a brief, respectful note. "Mrs. Whitmore, I believe you deserve to know the truth about your husband's relationship with my wife, Clara Bennett. I take no pleasure in sharing this information, but I would have wanted someone to extend me the same courtesy. Respectfully, Elliot Bennett." 3 days later, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Mr. Bennett?" A cool, cultured voice. "This is Miranda Whitmore. I wonder if you might join me for tea tomorrow afternoon." Miranda was nothing like I expected. Smaller, older, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. We sat in her penthouse with bone china teacups and spoke of betrayal with the clinical detachment of surgeons discussing a complicated procedure. "How long have you known?" she asked. "About 3 months," I replied. "You?" "I've suspected for years." She stirred her tea precisely 3 times. "Daniel has never been as clever as he thinks, but I needed proof that would stand up in court. And now you have it." She smiled thinly. Yes. My attorney says the evidence you provided essentially guarantees I'll receive everything in the divorce. The prenuptial agreement had an infidelity clause that Daniel seems to have forgotten about. I'm glad to hear it. She studied me over the rim of her cup. And what will you do about Clara? Something similar, I said, though we don't have a prenup. No, but you have paternity fraud. Miranda set her cup down with a soft clink. And that, Mr. Bennett, is actionable in court. She was right, of course. Miranda Whitmore had spent decades navigating high society and its complex legal entanglements. By the time I left her penthouse, I had the name of her divorce attorney and 3 separate specialists in paternity fraud cases. The pieces were falling into place. The corporate investigation moved with surprising speed. By the end of the week, both Clara and Daniel had been called to separate meetings with HR, legal, and security. By that afternoon, both had been escorted from the building, personal items in cardboard boxes, employee badges confiscated. Clara came home in a fury. Mascara streaked down her face. "You!" she spat the moment she saw me. "You did this!" I continued reading my book. "Did what?" "They fired me! They fired Daniel! They're saying we stole from the company!" She threw her box of desk items across the room. A framed photo of her and her mother shattered against the wall. "They're threatening criminal charges." "That sounds serious," I remarked, turning a page. "Perhaps you should call Daniel and coordinate your stories." She tried. For hours, she tried calling him, texting him, even emailing his personal account. No response. What she didn't know was that Daniel was currently in his own personal hell. Miranda had changed the locks on their apartment. His credit cards had been frozen. His personal accounts, jointly held with Miranda, were suddenly inaccessible. And the $30,000 Rolex he'd bought Clara for her birthday? Miranda's attorneys had already subpoenaed records proving it was purchased with their joint funds, making it marital property subject to division in the divorce. By midnight, Clara was frantic. "He's not answering. No one's answering. His wife, his friends. It's like everyone's ghosted me overnight." "That's unfortunate," I said, closing my book and standing. "I'm going to bed. You should probably start packing." "Packing?" She looked up, mascara now dried in black rivers down her cheeks. "What are you talking about?" "I filed for divorce this morning," I told her. "You'll be served officially tomorrow. The papers request you vacate our home within 5 days." She laughed, but it was brittle. "You can't do that. This is my house, too." "Actually, it's not." I smiled for the first time. "The mortgage is solely in my name. You insisted on that arrangement because your credit was bad after college. Remember? You said you didn't want to deal with the boring financial stuff." The color drained from her face. "But I've paid half the mortgage for years." "Have you?" "The bank statements show otherwise. Your contributions have been inconsistent at best. In fact, according to our financial records, you owe me approximately $67,000 for unpaid portions of our shared expenses." That figure was exaggerated, but she wouldn't know that. Clara had never bothered with our finances, happily letting me manage everything while she spent freely. "You can't do this to me," she whispered. "I'm Josh's mother." "Yes, and Daniel is Josh's father, as you so publicly announced." I headed for the stairs. "I suggest you speak with him about your living arrangements going forward." The next 6 months unfolded with the inexorable logic of a mathematical proof. Each action led to its inevitable reaction. Each consequence built upon the last. Daniel's fall was spectacular. Miranda's divorce settlement left him with nothing but personal possessions and a tarnished reputation. Whitmore Corporation's internal audit uncovered years of financial misconduct, resulting in civil penalties and a quiet settlement to avoid criminal charges, provided Daniel left the country and signed a non-disclosure agreement. He took a position with a minor firm in Singapore. No corner office, no executive perks. just a middle management role that barely covered his alimony payments to Miranda. Clara fared even worse. With no job, no savings, and no marketable skills beyond her connections at Whitmore, she moved in with her mother temporarily. The arrangement lasted 3 weeks before her mother threw her out, tired of Clara's endless complaints and refusal to look for work. My lawsuit for paternity fraud moved through the courts with surprising speed. Clara's public announcement at our anniversary dinner, witnessed by more than a dozen people, removed any ambiguity about her intent to deceive. The judge was particularly unimpressed by text messages Martin had recovered where Clara bragged to friends about tricking the idiot husband into raising another man's child. The final ruling was comprehensive. I owed no child support, no alimony, and was awarded damages for emotional distress and psychological manipulation. Clara would receive nothing in our divorce beyond her personal possessions. As for Josh, that was the most painful part. He was confused, angry, torn between the father who had raised him and the biological truth that had been cruelly revealed. I arranged for him to see a child psychologist and maintained contact through supervised visits arranged by family services. "Why did Mom lie?" he asked during one visit, his small face serious beneath the playground equipment. "Sometimes adults make mistakes," I said carefully. "Big ones. But none of this is your fault. Are you still my dad?" His voice was small, uncertain. I pulled him into a hug, my throat tight. "I will always be the person who loves you, Josh. Nothing changes that." It wasn't a perfect answer, but it was the most honest one I could give. The courts would determine the rest. 1 year after that fateful anniversary dinner, I stood in my new apartment, surrounded by moving boxes and the clean slate of blank walls. The windows faced east, filling the space with morning light. No memories lived here. No ghosts haunted the corners. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Whitmore Corporation had completed its restructuring following the financial scandal. The stock had recovered. New leadership was in place. Another notification followed, an email from my attorney. Clara's appeal had been denied. The court's ruling was final. I deleted both without opening them. The past was the past. I had no interest in revisiting it. Later that evening, as I unpacked books onto new shelves, my phone rang. Martin Seaver, checking in as he occasionally did. "Heard anything?" he asked without preamble. "About?" I questioned. "Clara. Word is she finally got hired at some startup, entry-level marketing assistant. Quite a step down from deputy marketing director," he replied. I placed another book on the shelf. "Good for her. You don't care?" "I'm done caring, Martin," I replied. A pause on the line. "Fair enough. And Daniel? Any interest there?" "None." Martin chuckled. "Well, in case you're curious, he's apparently drinking heavily. Singapore doesn't seem to agree with him." I wasn't curious. Not anymore. The anger that had driven me for so long had burned itself out, leaving behind something unexpected. Peace. "I appreciate the update," I said. "But I'm moving on." After we hung up, I returned to my unpacking. Outside my window, the city stretched out in a grid of lights and possibilities. Somewhere in that grid, Clara was starting over with her entry-level job and studio apartment. Somewhere else, Daniel was nursing a drink, far from the wealth and status he'd once enjoyed. And here I was, in a space of my own making. No lies, no manipulation, just quiet and the freedom to rebuild. The glass Clara had raised that night, the one that had signaled the end of our marriage, had shattered when it fell. But unlike Humpty Dumpty, not all broken things need putting back together. Sometimes breaking is just the beginning of something better. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.